King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast, a weekly media commentary talking about traditional and digital media headlines and talking to the content creators out front and behind the scenes. Here is the King of Podcasts. Time for another Broadcasters Podcast. Thanks for being here. This is yours truly, King of Podcasts. We're going to talk about Howard Stern and Joe Rogan starting off tonight because this feud never needed to have happened. And really, what the argument's over, it's petty. I understand people feel there's obviously a lot of seriousness behind COVID. I'm not going to dispute that, and I'm not going to discourage that. I'm not going to downplay it. I get that part. But, you know, to agitate, to try to start something up with Joe Rogan, for what? When you look at the way it looks from my end, without going on any political things, okay? Because I guess this is an apolitical show. I am a fence sitter. But I have to say that Howard Stern is trying to... I feel like he's punching down. Where he's actually trying to punch up. Because Joe Rogan... I mean, to the credit, Joe Rogan gets more headlines now than Howard Stern has. When Howard Stern gets another $500 million contract, sure. But other than that, I mean, Howard Stern is a figure of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. I mean, you know, that he's not going to just be on top forever. And there's been times where he's been more popular than others. And right now, you know, he has the advantage of letting SiriusXM just take him on, and he can work the Johnny Carson type gig, work 3 days a week. Hey, good for him. If Mel Karmazin or whoever has preceded him, they want to continue to keep putting out money for SiriusXM because they feel like he's an important enough person to bring on for the couple of million subscribers that he brings on at a high premium, then sure. I mean, that's the purpose. But let's not be saying to anybody that we feel like this guy is a bigger deal than he is. He doesn't have the clout nor the celebrity status that he has. Now, if obviously he's getting a lot of celebrities because they're booking those celebrities for him. But he will only get those celebrities now is because because his questions are not as hardball. Well, he's not as confrontational. Maybe he has poignant questions and things like that, but it's not as good as it was. Because he got better. I think he just was better when he was able to keep his guests a bit uncomfortable. Because the celebrities now are way too comfortable in that show. And sure, he still has a way of doing interviews and getting some good poignant things out of people. But, you know, it's that and changing up his shtick because he apologized. When he apologized a couple of years ago and he put out his last book, it turned me the wrong way about him. And I did quite a bit of stuff on the When I'm Not Podcasting series. No, it was only like a year and a half ago where I started talking about Howard Stern and just what he was doing. I was like, what is going on here? My frustration was, why was he changing? And what for? Because he had not gotten canceled, but it was something about him feeling like he needed to go ahead and play the victim of cancel culture without actually physically getting canceled, without any fear of him losing his show. Because he's not going to lose his show. He's not going to lose his status. He's not going to lose his money, his houses, his fame, his fortune, his wife, nobody. Okay, he's Teflon. He is not going to get canceled out. And nobody's going to try to do that. But for whatever reason, Howard Stern wants to go and kind of do that, kind of take the cancel culture role right now, and he's attacking Joe Rogan. I don't know how much of it I believe that Howard Stern really needs to go and he comes back from vacation and decides to start going and making attacks because he's decided now to just alienate half his audience, in essence. Because we can't say that out of the 75% of people that probably been vaccinated, that there wasn't a good amount of that 25% that is not, that probably were listeners to his show. So, you know, I don't know if he's necessarily getting a different minded, more of a sophisticated or much more, you know, socially, culturally cognizant, you know, accepting, tolerating different diversities, cultures, sexual persuasions, all of that, you know, embracing the wokeness, if you will, whatever is being considered woke. I feel like that's what he's been doing right now, is he's trying to embrace it. but while trying to toe the line of still trying to kind of placate to his original audience. Maybe not so much, because I don't think I think he's kind of abandoned. He's kind of neglected the audience for a long time. And also because a lot of people have kind of just, once he went to Sirius, you got to keep people engaged to want to go and keep paying to listen to your show. And there's only going to be so much of people that are going to go and pay to go and listen to the archives. Sure. But of newer content, I mean, if you got anything new to say, I think some people would skip out of Sirius XM because there's, again, so many other places you can go with that subscription and what you want to buy. That's what it feels like to me anyway. Now, how New York Post in the last year or so, they have been pretty critical and definitely have not been afraid of reaching out and talking about Howard Stern. So he's been in there, and obviously he's always been talking on the New York Post, page 6 and all that. So going back to late last year, one of his engineers on the show had complained about the fact that he and his wife battling non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, Scott Salem, his wife since 2013, and he wanted to make a GoFundMe page. I said, I'm not going to go into the whole story about that. But Stern obviously is always concerned about anybody using his fame or using his name to work on the people. That's where he's coming from on that. Okay. And that's something that he's always kind of dealt with. But now there's been people that have been very loyal to him that have benefited greatly from being on that show. Robin Quivers or Gary Delabate or Fred North. They're like, that nucleus has been there the whole time, and there's others that are around, and they stuck around. And that's where they come from. Earlier this year, late in December of 2020, he signed a new 5-year deal with Sirius, reportedly upwards of $100 million a year. Another $500 million deal. His net worth right now is estimated at more than $500 million. This isn't the same guy that was scrapping and trying to make a name for himself. Because that is the Howard Stern that was best, that was trying to make something for himself and trying to become famous. Without having all of the people that were there that were constantly, because he was there to talk to sleaze, provide the sleaze as well. Like he was absolutely somebody on radio in the morning that, was a go-to listen to. Notoriously would go after various celebrities, personally having feuds with the likes of Chevy Chase or Bill Maher. And then all of a sudden there's people that he's coming back to and now he's apologizing to, right? Making up for things like that. And I don't like where all this stuff is all gone, what he's done. And, he's just doing what he wants to do. And he's not had the kind of complete success that he had before. He had his premium paid channel, Howard TV, that was canceled. And all those employees were laid off. So that's gone. All it is the radio show. But nevertheless, he's spending his money, $52 million on a 19,000 square foot waterfront mansion in Palm Beach. So he's going on and doing his own thing. He also has an 8-bedroom mansion that sits on a $20 million piece of property in Southampton in the Hamptons. And also has, an apartment on the 53rd and 54th floors of the Millennium Tower, one of the priciest buildings in Manhattan. All those 3 properties total $90 million. He's done well for himself. And for somebody that doesn't have anything, should not have a worry at all. He has a beautiful wife. He has charities. He's philanthropic. He helps people. And, he gets to work the schedule he wants. So all of a sudden now, he's complaining. And I just feel like that complaining is just to get people to talk about him again. That's what it feels like. And I don't know if some people will probably tell me I'm wrong about that, but that's what it sounds like to me. Knowing the history of what this guy as an on-air personality has done, it's not like he's ever looked for the fights. I don't think it's so much of that. I mean, he's brought on fights, sure, but he's also they're supposed to be kind of entertaining. I mean, it's part of the entertainment of the show. But he's being serious now, and he's changed his tune. Even the New York Post even talked about it back in April. that he's no longer a shock jock. He's lost the sting in his mojo. And Maureen Callahan wrote the fact that she says, right on the top of this article, she says that the Howard Stern Show Long in Decline is dead. And the other thing I think that's also hasn't helped for him too, am I right? Is he still not in studio? He's not returned back to his Midtown studio or his Upper West Side apartment. I don't think he's gone back to that. I think he stayed in Palm Beach and he feels like he needs to stay under quarantine. Well, I mean, he can live comfortably doing that if he wants to. And Howard, back in April, mentioned, quote, "Things will never get back to normal. I do not believe the pandemic will ever be over." But this is also this also would go in line with what he is, that he is a germaphobe. And that kind of worries about him anyway. And I just think that he feels like the news, which he shouldn't have been paying attention to in the first place, has messed with him. Right now, he broadcasts Monday through Wednesdays, 3 hours a day, about 112 shows per year, and 253 days off, averaging $1 million per show that he actually does for a 3-hour show. Hey, he's done it. Maureen Callahan writes in the story here, sentiments about what he's been talking about now, this dark thought of the pandemic and how things are not going to come back to normal or some semblance of normal. It defines Stern's show and attitude: pessimism, anger, and a worldview that shrinks ever inward, limited in size and scope to the basement, the literal and metaphorical dwelling place of this once great show. She says that today it's all too easy to predict what Stern will say next. Don't take my word for it. Endless Reddit threads and Facebook groups are devoted to carbon dating the show's death, parsing over his comedic breadcrumbs, and wondering why Stern even bothers anymore, which is very true. There's more to be said about what's going on here, but people can break down Howard Stern. I don't want to do that. Let's get into the actual story of this newest feud. Him and Joe Rogan, for whatever reason, they're going after each other. So I'm going to take a story from Uproxx. Howard Stern's listeners and Joe Rogan's fans are feuding on social media, and it's getting very ugly. From Josh Kerp. And Howard Stern's message to Joe Rogan and all the other idiots in the country who refuse to get vaccinated: go fuck yourself. Quote from Howard: I heard Joe Rogan was saying, "Why are you busting my balls for? I took horse dewormer and the doctor gave it to me." Well, a doctor would also give you a vaccine, so why take horse dewormer? We have no time for idiots in this country anymore. We don't want you. We want you to all either go to the hospital and stay home, die there with your COVID. Don't take the cure, but don't clog up our hospitals with your COVID when you finally get it. Stay home. Don't bother with science. It's too late. Go fuck yourself. We just don't have time for you. That's pretty dark. And let's move along here. Now, the people that are actually talking about him, let me just say it like this. Some of the people that are commenting about Howard Stern and what he's saying now, it's the same kind of political pundits that are out there that would have said shit about him and would have crapped all over him if it was 20 years ago. Okay, but the fact that he's now turned a new leaf, there are people that are sanctimonious, okay, and hypocrites that now they're going to talk nice about Howard Stern. Oh, so 20 years ago when he was, having girls, take their clothes off for some, new watch or jewelry from Steven Singer Jewelers, okay, or he's using the little laser pens to point out parts of a girl's body that are imperfect. Okay. You're going to tell me that's okay, huh? Yeah. But that's an easy shot. I know that's a pretty easy shot. And a lot of people are doing that right now. But here's what's being said in here. It's old media versus new media divide with fart jokes. Quote, Howard Stern evolved into a compassionate adult human being who understands the responsibility of his platform. Joe Rogan still hasn't gotten the fart man yet, author John Pavlovitz tweeted. And another person wrote, quote, Howard clearly is envious of Rogan, as Rogan is the hot radio guy now. Something Howard used to be a long, long time ago. Rogan might have the world's most popular podcast, but most people seem to be taking the side of the guy who's getting vaccinated instead of pro horse dewormer. As Stern put it, fuck their freedom. This is not the same Howard Stern. My issue, listen, if there's a narrative, there's a reason why he wants to do that, it's up to him. But I don't like people that just decide all of a sudden to just change. It's what Tom Leykis said. You don't need to apologize. You don't need to apologize if you don't have anything to apologize for. But he was on an apology tour now. Now he's getting to a point where he's getting something else. But let's just say it's going to alienate his listeners. And he's under contract. It doesn't matter what happens to him now. He signed his deal. It started in January 2021 through 2026 up until he's 72 years old. Either he could do the same damn show that he does for 3 days a week, crotchety old man, take his time, go live in his mansions with his wife and his pets and do whatever. Because I don't know if I believe the whole thing about him being so worried about vaccinations. I don't know. I just think as a celebrity, that's kind of a hypocrite thing to say. Who knows? Maybe some paparazzi will probably catch him outside and they'll be caught in this hypocrisy. Because I think that will very well happen someday. Now, I am not here to defend Joe Rogan. Listen, Joe Rogan opened his mouth about his treatment for COVID. People were going to ask, how did he get over it? He decided to say it. He's going to get the kind of... Listen, and we already know how the news media works, okay? The news media is a joke altogether. And so if they decide to go ahead and start talking about horse deworming and all this stuff, I saw those stories. When I go to my For You page on Google, first I get to the main headlines and I just skip to my For You page that has something else that's not that. But I know everybody was going after that and just piling on. I get it. And I could care less. But that's what they decided to do. Why does it matter? And I'm not here to go and talk about the other people that are talking on here and making points about this. I just don't care. Doesn't make a difference. But people obviously like the fact that Howard Stern, they love the fact that he said, go fuck yourself. They really love that. It's like, yeah. Well, that's not his fan base that's following that. I don't think it's so much of that. I don't think it makes much of a difference. Now, Joe Rogan, one thing that's happened with Joe Rogan, I will say, is that he has been subjected to a lot of ridicule, which is what Howard Stern used to get. The kind of crap that Howard Stern used to get flack for, not the same stuff, but the amount of ridicule and criticism and negativity towards Howard Stern. The new kid on the block now is Joe Rogan. And he really got to this because he got the Spotify deal. Because he got that deal. He's one of the big ones that got on Spotify and got the $100 million deal that he got. And that's everything that was brought up. And there's a lot of people that do like to talk about Joe Rogan. They listen to him. They follow what he's doing. I'm going from hotnewhiphop.com talking about this. Since the beginning of the pandemic, seemingly everything Rogan says or does cause some sort of uproar. From his conversations with Kanye West and Alex Jones, to his misuse of scientific information to fortify his anti-vax sentiments. Similar to Billboard's recent comments and wishes for the pandemic to get deadlier and his desires for the virus to wipe out way more people, Stern took no prisoners when talking about Rogan, and despite making the comments over a week ago, the war ignited between the two comedians' fan bases rages on. There are those siding with Stern who agree that Rogan is foolish for not taking the vaccine and irresponsible for spreading misinformation about its effects. And there are the Rogan stans who say Stern is jealous of Rogan's success and accuse him and his supporters of being simple-minded sheep. Yeah. It's a stupid argument in general. But if you notice, the only person that's stirring this shit up is Howard Stern. As far as I don't know if Rogan has even commented of what I'm looking at right now. I don't see it. Between Stern's Go Fuck Yourself and Rogan's standing firm in their stance that Stern is jealous of the Joe Rogan Experience podcast host, it seems pretty clear that the two sides have reached a stalemate, and knowing both fan bases, neither of them are going to budge. Both Stern and Rogan have the ears of millions of people, so it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. But in the meantime, let us know if Stern was right to put Rogan on blast like he did. But it's a one-sided argument. Rogan said what he said, and Stern decided to go ahead and go after Rogan, unprovoked. Stern took offense and decided to make comments. It's to create another feud. It's just like another feud. That's all it is. Off and on with Andrew Dice Clay. Off and on with Gilbert Gottfried. It doesn't matter. If it keeps us listeners going, that's going back to the well. Back to the bag of tricks. Let's do something we hadn't done in a while. Let's get another feud going. Let's go after somebody big. Well, I can't go after all these other people because I have to play nice to all these other people. But Joe Rogan, he's fair game. Alex Jones is fair game too. I know. He does that. I know what he does. I heard all that stuff. That Howard Stern likes to go and have somebody play Alex Jones, and Alex Jones loves it. He thinks it's great. I've heard all that. Howard Stern's doing nothing. He doesn't move the needle at all by doing this. It just sounds petty. It sounds like he's trying to go back to his bag of tricks to try to continue to get something that people will talk about. Because his normal shtick with his usual people, with Richard or Sal or, Gary and all this other stuff, I don't know if it's just working anymore. I don't know if it stands anymore. If people care. That's the one show that you could absolutely still keep doing the shtick with the rest of his crew, and people would care about those other people's lives because they've been around so long. At this point, it doesn't matter. Stern is creating headlines for himself. And he had to go and say, go fuck yourself, fuck your freedom. You got to go to that level of commentary in order to get the press to respond to him, to say something. I mean, that's quite interesting he had to do that. And it's funny how some people actually talk about this. Okay, I'm going to read from Barstool Sports. Don't judge me for saying this, or for reading this, but I'm just going to read it. They referred to him in this story as New Howard Stern hates Joe Rogan worse than anyone ever hated original recipe Howard Stern. That's pretty funny. Now, they have more of the commentary that he made. In this story from Barstool Sports, they say, I'm just here to watch this battle play out. Because I believe ultimately this is where the battle lies of our time are being drawn. Two strong personalities with legions of followers that number in the millions, each with tons of money and influence, who are both virtually cancel-proof. Virtually cancel-proof. That's the other point you got to keep across. And I don't know if Stern's doing this because he has to be a voice for cancel culture. I don't know if it's that so much, but it's not going to work anyway in this story. And if I had to handicap it, I can't see any way Rogan doesn't win this battle on a route for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is his greatest strength is his curiosity and thirst for knowledge. Whatever else you think about ivermectin, he talked to a doctor who told him he believes in its efficacy. The last I looked, Stern was talking to Jimmy Kimmel and Elton John. Besides that, there's not a Stern fan I know who doesn't see him as a sellout. Someone who's disavowed everything that made his show the best thing on the air. His two Sirius XM stations are next to one another. I defy anyone to sit to the current one where he's talking to Drew Barrymore about how great her daytime talk show is, then flip to classic Stern having a guest queef Flight of the Bumblebee and not with the stick with Howard in his prime. Yeah, that's a pretty accurate statement. More to the point, I can't imagine that peak Howard would have been screaming about other people's personal decisions. Sure, he openly rooted for someone to die. Don Imus and the religious jealous that were always trying to get him thrown off the air, just to name a few. Yeah, he did that. And, wasn't against him on that. I mean, it was personal attacks. That makes sense. If it's Morton Downey he was going after, sure. Yeah, I get it. Don Imus, absolutely. Whatever radio hosts that were out there he was trying to go after too, every Newmark he went to and did a funeral for, yeah. But that was Stern with a small L libertarian to the extreme. I can't imagine him demanding people that take a drug they, for whatever reason, don't trust or don't take one that they do. For certain, he would have been putting Jenna Jameson on a Symbian instead of giving off big old man yells at clouds energy. That's pretty funny. The bottom line is, this is a battle Stern might have won 20 years ago. He's absolutely right. But his audience has aged out of fights like this. He doesn't stand a chance against the king of all podcasts. So there you go. Not king of podcasts. He says king of all podcasts. Got it. Joke. Pun intended. Got it. I don't know what to say about this. It bothers me because I don't want to be seeing there's no reason. And honestly, there's no competition here. Most importantly, why isn't Howard never did a podcast? Of somebody who's been so forward thinking in radio that brought us the current radio that we have today, the current incarnation of morning show radio, not so much the morning shows we have there, but like we had a particular type of morning show radio and a style that preceded him that came forward and really brought up a lot of different thinking and a lot of different ways of, really was just for guys. It was this kind of show that was rebellious and was one of the last bastions of freedom, of free talk and just, expression and sex and all that shit, man. Crucified by the FCC, remember? The only thing he does right now is he gets a little curse on Sirius, but that's about it. Otherwise, I can find more stories about people that are canceling or that are basically saying that Stern is a sellout. Because he is. And it bothers me to say that. Because that was somebody that I really thought, I really had a lot of respect for. Because he did it his way. And that's the way it was. Tom Leykis had a pretty good run. Did things his way. And, then there was a point where when CBS, didn't want to put him on the air and he just took his contract, he took the money for it, decided to run his own thing with New Normal, he went. He's found a niche for himself. Not the level of Howard Stern, but he's doing it. He's profiting from it. Fine. And he'll go along and move along through doing that. Phil Henry did the same thing. Good for them. They all went out to their own greener pastures in podcasting, premium podcasting. Howard could have claimed a fortune. I mean, with Joe Rogan, you have to pay, $10 or whatever, $8 to get on there to listen to a show, as far as I know. Or that's the video version, that's right. But either which way, Rogan's making money. And it's not just a podcast. He still does UFC broadcasts. I mean, he still has other things going on. So he's fine. And his show's not even trying to compete with Stern. Let's just be honest here. Rogan doesn't have some group. Like, he's not talking to his sidekick or whatever. And, he's not talking to Jamie like Howard talks to Gary, right? I don't hear him doing that. And Joe just kind of, he's not even like, he's funny all the time. He's just, he's a comedian. He's funny. He does stand up. He's multiversatile. And he just talks to people. He just does interviews. Long-winded interviews, and that's fine. Some of them I'll listen to, some of them I won't. I haven't listened to Joe Rogan in a while. Since he moved to Spotify, I haven't listened to one of his shows. I haven't even caught a clip. Some clips on TikTok here and there because they jump into my For You page. But that's about it. It makes no sense why these two are feuding. Or it's not even a feud, really, because as far as I know, Rogan's not responded back. Because it doesn't matter. Rogan just kind of brushes off the negativity, brushes off the criticism, because he knows. He knows. That guy's not necessarily political. He's talked to a lot of different people on the air. He's not afraid of who he talks to. Pretty obvious of that. And I watch some of the political people he's had on, and some of the other people that might have a differing opinion. He doesn't care. It doesn't matter to him. For whatever reason, Howard Stern, he's got his group of guests that, they're not the buzz of discussion. Meanwhile, Joe Rogan has people that do. And because he's been on Spotify, he's getting bigger guests. He's doing better. But also, I think Howard Stern also would not deny him. He would deny himself talking to other guests that might be that he would come back and he would debate that would be against the grain of what he thinks of things. But he doesn't do that anymore. Whatever it is. He did disavow everything. He did, so Hollywood will love him. And so he has people that like him. But they don't care about him. They don't. I would think that Howard had more backbone to not worry about that. I would have preferred that Howard wouldn't have kept doing his show. I keep saying that over and over. Why didn't Howard just go ahead and decide just to go do an interview series on TV or something else? Why keep doing that radio show? Why not do what Jerry Seinfeld did and go out in your prime? Seriously, you could have left 10 years ago. You could have taken your initial deal with Sirius, and 2010, you could have dropped out and gone to the horizon. You could have, walked away with so much money. But yeah, the money's there. They keep throwing money at him. Made another $1 billion for his team for that show in the extra 10 years. So yeah, he keeps taking the money. I can't deny. I can't. They keep throwing money at him. I don't think they throw that kind of money at him after this 5-year deal. I think at 72 years old, he does retire. He should anyway. It's enough. I mean, I don't know how old David Letterman is, but I don't think he went that long either. I think at least David Letterman, he's still doing stuff on Netflix. That could have been something he could have done. And Letterman's 74. A little bit older. But he could have done what David Letterman did and decided to go, I'm going to do my Netflix show. He could have done that. But he never did. I don't know why not. Doesn't make sense. But he should have. Oh, well. Okay, let's move along to a couple of other things. My other big headline today, I'm following the story of the IATSC and the AMPTP. I've been talking about that for the last couple of weeks here on the show. The imminent Hollywood strike. So a couple of days ago, Variety.com and Gene Matos actually talked about how a strike would shut down film and TV production coast to coast. Another shutdown. So the International Association of Theatrical Stage Employees called on Monday for a strike authorization vote, setting in motion potentially the biggest labor shutdown in Hollywood since the last writer's strike 14 years ago. And there's a lot of people in this group. Some 60,000 IATSC members could end up walking off the job, most based in Los Angeles. A strike, if it comes, would lead to a nationwide shutdown of TV and film production because of the 3 local, 600, 700, 800 that are national unions. Coast to coast. One of the members of IATSC that was quoted in this article, quote, "They think they got us by the balls. We make the product. If we don't show up to work, where are they going to sell?" IATSC has never gone on strike before, and a strike authorization vote does not mean the strike will happen this time, but it does show that IATSC is being more aggressive about issues that have lingered over many past negotiations, including long workdays and lower rates for new media. So they haven't worried about the streaming part yet. The strike authorization vote is expected to begin October 1st, results on October 4th. So in a couple of weeks, we'll keep about it right here on the Broadcasters talk about it. Now, here's what happens. If they say yes, it would be seen as giving the union negotiators greater leverage at the bargaining table. But calling a vote also carries the risk that if they say no, or not a big yes, it could undermine the union's position because they want to make sure that they have the majority, more than a majority of people saying, Let's go for it. Let's make it happen. For each local, 75% of the voting members would have to vote in favor. The union delegates support the authorization. Now, this does not cover production in Canada or other countries. So some U.S. productions might try to move abroad if a strike is called. However, Canadian film workers are also represented by IATSE locals, and those workers might be expected to not work on productions that fled the U.S. And another person talks about saying that the AMPTP's latest move in which it refused to respond to the IATSE proposal was an insult, or seen as an insult. Quote, I believe that the laws of probability now are in favor of a strike. They're going to have to taste this medicine. So there's a lot of thought that we might get to a strike. It might actually happen. Deadline.com gets an update on this as I recorded the show tonight. And they report that the AMPTP responds as the IATSE gears up for a second strike. The union seeks separate strike authorization from locals across the U.S. So now, the AMPTP, the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, responded to this announcement of the strike authorization vote. Both contracts, the Basic Agreement and Area Standards Agreement, expired on July 31st, but were extended in an effort to exhaust every opportunity to make the deal. So the talks about the Basic Agreement broke off, and the negotiations for the Area Standards Agreement have grounded to a halt. The AMPTP said it remains committed, quote, to reaching an agreement at the bargaining table. But they accused the union of publishing false information about the negotiations that unnecessarily polarizes the bargaining parties and elevates tensions at a time when we should be focused on finding ways to avoid a strike. Now, in the statement, they say, quote, it is unfortunate the IATSE has gone down the path of publishing false information about the negotiations. This approach unnecessarily polarizes the bargaining parties and elevates tensions at a time which should be focused on finding ways to avoid a strike. A strike will have a devastating impact on the industry and inevitably will result in thousands of members losing their income, failing to qualify for health insurance benefits, jeopardizing funding for the pension plan, and disrupting production. The producers are committed to reaching an agreement at the bargaining table that balances the needs of both parties and will keep the industry working. Well, what happened last time, when it comes down to the other strike that was going on, when it came to the Screen Actors Guild and the agents, the Association of Talent Agents, well, what happened there was the pandemic happened in the middle of all this, because it went back to April 2019 that we had the strike, or we had the labor dispute. And then what happened is the agencies kind of fell apart. And all these new boutique agencies came into play. But what was supposed to happen was that the Writers Guild and the Association of Talent Agents, they were supposed to have their label negotiations done. And then down the line, the Alliance of Motion Television Producers and Motion Picture Television Producers and the IATSE were going to follow suit and take care of their deals, because the labor negotiations would have gone from organization to organization, and it never happened. COVID happened. But then this right here, it wasn't going to be held back because they still needed to get to this. And now they did. And that's not good. And then another story that comes on to the same vein is the fact that the Editors Guild, another organization, voted unanimously to recommend members back the strike authorization. So more to go into this. This is from the Hollywood Reporter, going to all these different industry rags. The members of the local 700 of the Motion Picture Editors Guild voted unanimously to recommend to members they vote yes in support of a strike authorization regarding the basic agreement negotiations with the Alliance of Motion Picture and TV Producers. The IATSE also holding their own strike authorization vote. Now, IATSE also represents estimated 150,000 entertainment workers in U.S. and Canada. cinematographers, costumers, makeup artists, and hairstylists. The Editors Guild represents an estimated 8,000 picture and sound editors, as well as additional post-production workers. The International Cinematographers Guild, the largest of the locals represented by the agreement, had multiple meetings. Quote, a lot of organizations in the motion picture industry are coming around towards common goals, according to Hollywood Reporter. We see where the future revenue is with streaming residuals, and we are seeing work hours increasing. It's the right time to address this. So with all that happened, the digital disruption and the pandemic caused all this, because the pandemic fueled and accelerated the digital disruption, because the thought process was they were afraid. All the studios, all these people were afraid. They did not think of the ramifications that would come from the unions by doing this. So but what they did, they decided we had this shutdown for pandemic that caused things to happen. And they said to themselves, okay, well then we need to do something about if we lose the theaters for a long time, Broadway for a long time, we need to find something else. When it comes to movies and television, well, we're going to go to streaming. We're going to start changing all our stuff to streaming, because the streaming became much more popular as soon as the pandemic hit. When people got quarantined, more commonly staying home, one of the major factors was media consumption changed. No longer networking cable as much, a further erosion or cable cutting or cord cutting to streaming. And since the pandemic ended, a lot of changes happened. One streaming service completely fell by the wayside and got destroyed, Quibi. And we've had a slew of new companies come in with their own platforms. Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, Peacock, HBO Max, Discovery Plus. Like, they all came into one shot. So there's all these stories right now that are coming up. What's going to happen next? We don't know. One other story I want to talk about when it comes to the Hollywood end, before you can wrap things up, because that's my second major story, is cryptocurrency. A cryptocurrency firm is now spending big on Hollywood names to gain interest. Hollywood Reporter also reporting on this. So FTX, Coinbase, and CoinFlip, these are all like wallet services. They're cryptocurrency services, or brokers, if you will, are listing stars like Spike Lee, Neil Patrick Harris, and Tom Brady, shelling out TV ads to gain wider respectability and convert skeptical customers. A lot of changes going on right there. You know, because you're starting to see with sports, we're starting to see the increase of gambling commercials. Well, now we're going to start seeing crypto commercials. Could very well happen. Hollywood, once again, is being used as an industry on the fringe, hoping to gain mainstream acceptance. Cryptocurrency firms, including exchanges, digital wallets, and other businesses in the sector, are lining up celebrity endorsers and scooping up TV ads in a bid to gain scale and greater customer or consumer respectability. They're not using influencers. They're going for celebrities. And part of the thing is, I think, is they're probably going to be able to get some of these celebrities at a cheaper rate, because they need something to latch onto that's something more current. Like, they need to be on something that is the future. So they're going to try to let themselves be pushed out in front of crypto to promote crypto. I don't know if that's a good move, but okay. Crypto companies like FTX, Robinhood, PayPal, CoinCloud, CoinFlip, and others are leaning on talent like Tom Brady and his wife Gisele Bündchen, Spike Lee, MJ Rodriguez, and Neil Patrick Harris to introduce lay consumers to that world. There's a $20 million ad for Brady and Bündchen for FTX that debuted during the first week of the NFL's new season. In July, Lee directed and starred with Rodriguez in an ad for CoinCloud, saw him declare old money is out, quote, and new money is in. Crypto companies aren't leaning on the power of public figures to generate awareness. They increasingly are becoming a new revenue stream for entertainment companies, aggressively buying commercial ad space or enticing potential new consumers by letting them pay with crypto, which is what AMC Theaters CEO Adam Aron says they will let users buy tickets, or popcorn with Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum by year's end. So there's another thing. The celebrities or the people that are either movie stars or in television, they're trying to latch on because of other companies in the media starting to allow crypto to be used. In a call with reporters September 8th, Dan Lovinger, Executive Vice President of Sales and Partnerships at NBC Sports, called out digital wallets and cryptocurrency as, quote, an intriguing new category for NFL and Super Bowl ad sales. At a virtual conference for Bank of America, CEO of Fox Corporation Lachlan Murdoch, noted that ad buys from auto and telecom companies are still down due to lingering COVID-19 concerns, but added that pleasingly we are seeing new advertisers coming to sport, highlighting new digital advertisers specifically. As crypto-adjacent ventures like non-fungible tokens or NFTs continue to proliferate, the intersection of entertainment, commerce, and crypto is likely to become an even more crowded space. One person quoted here is what we're seeing, quote, is that crypto is becoming cultural. It's becoming ingrained within popular culture and starting to appeal to a wider range of consumers. Where there before were only early adopters are interested in Bitcoin or trading in finance, now with NFTs, it is appealing to people who are interested in art or music or entertainment. So it makes sense that the mainstream figures and entertainers see the opportunity for them to help have a closer relationship with their fans, drive more engagement, and really drive more commerce. So there you go. Interesting stuff. We could very well see that come to light. I got a boatload of more stories to get to. I'm not even going to get to tonight. But let's go through a couple of the things. So I got a lot on the music industry. I'm going to hold off on that, I think, because I got, other stories I got our radio stations, genres for lifestyles. I'm going to hold off on that. The power of TikTok and disrupting the music industry. The evolution of the music industry and what it means for your marketing yourself as a musician. SiriusXM hopes to grow subscribers outside the car. Let me bring that story up real quick while I got a chance. I'll pull that up real quick. I got a few minutes left. CEO Jennifer Witt says the car will remain the foundation of our business, but increasingly our growth going forward will come outside of the car. The car will remain the foundation of our business. She does worry about a recession or economic pullback because SiriusXM offers a premium subscription service. There's always a risk that customers don't want to pay for what we are offering. Now, with John Malone's Liberty Media owning about 80% of SiriusXM now, which was asked about the firm's capital allocation strategy, expects to continue stock buybacks and dividends over the long term. When Liberty goes above 80%, they could choose to participate in our buyback. They also talked about the growth potential in the podcasting space, including from advertising. She said the SiriusXM is open to offering listeners owned and operated and third-party podcasts, and also wants to provide unique opportunities for talent such as Tom Brady, Megyn Kelly, and Kevin Hart. Right now, the company said it was on track to add 1.1 million self-pay subscribers this year, highest figure since 2018. At the end of June, their current load of customers are 34.5 million users. I don't know what they're going to be able to do to keep people engaged in buying, but they're much like DirecTV, I notice now, how they like to go and do things where they are constantly, going through things with rigging the price, and like people are getting charged all of a sudden $28.99 a month for a premium service. And then, somebody has to go on the phone with customer service and have to haggle their price down. And then they offer the bare bottom price of $6 a month for the next 6 months or something like that, the next 12 months, something like that. Something crazy. But you have to haggle now. Much like you did with DirecTV or other cable companies, now SiriusXM will let you haggle down the price. That's fun. Wonderful. Now, this story I meant to go and talk about because I know this was something that we wanted to bring up last week, and I promised I would do that. And I even did a podcasting on one tip on TikTok, and I'm going to be recording soon, where I said I need to go and talk about this. I want to make sure I brought it up. Digiday put a report on here that says, "Not on me to save the media industry. Confessions of early career journalists leaving the industry." So, an unnamed person spoke to Digiday about what they said. And they talk about a recent announcement leaving the job of a legacy news publication. This journalist says they had a full-time role with benefits, felt stable, but it crashed and burned. The pandemic didn't help, but the project didn't have the support that it needed to turn into something big. The company wasn't open to change as they said they were, a constant frustration. They're bringing in young people to help and change the paradigm, but they didn't utilize them in the most effective way with their talent. We had to conform to fit this mainstream publication. I was constantly contorting my ideas to fit what was seen as an accessible and objective story by their editors and their audience. Then I realized I don't have to do that. The rest of my career doesn't have to be that. There was no urgency to change or adapt to the times. I didn't want to stay on what felt like a sinking ship. Yep. When asked about is the publication or the industry as a whole sinking, the journalist said, quote, I mean, they're $1 billion business. They're going to be making lots of money for years to come, but their influence is eroding, and trust of them is eroding. In 10 years, I don't see any mainstream publication being the voice that people are going to when they want to learn something. It'll be smaller publications or independent actors online who have made names for themselves outside of the mainstream. We live in a society where we don't need mainstream publications to share our perspectives. Amen. This person's absolutely correct. There's less dependence on these institutions compared to previous generations. Asked about why deciding to leave now, I know I didn't want to work for a social media company because it's similar to the mainstream media. There's a lot of negative sentiment and scrutiny. I wanted to join an exciting industry and a growing company. I'm making a lot more now than I was, and more than I would have made if I worked at a publication for 10 years. When asked if other journalists maybe seem to be leaving the industry, quote, I'm sure the pandemic had a big role. It made you assess what you're spending your time and energy on. If it didn't feel good to you, why keep doing it? It made it easier for those kind of decisions, especially for younger journalists. It's not the mid-career people leaving the industry. It's people in their first 5 to 7 years. That's a problem for the talent pipeline for the next generation of journalism. Maybe they'll want to come back, but they are leaving because they are recognizing those same issues. You get into journalism because you have this idealism to tell great stories, to change things about your community, to share underrepresented perspectives. I feel like it requires a lot of enthusiasm and energy to get some of these high-impact stories out the door. Then it's like, why am I putting all this into this corporation? I'll just tell stories on my own that I find myself. I have the experiences as a journalist. I don't feel the burden of needing to conform to my editor because they are worried about blowback from a 65-year-old white dude from California. Mainstream media isn't realizing that young people can build their own platforms to tell their own stories. I want to work on short films and mini documentaries on my own platforms. I don't feel guilty leaving. It's not on me to save the media industry. A very brave choice to this journalist, and I commend this journalist for feeling the way he or she did and making the change. Can't blame them on that. One other story I'm going to talk about here is from Media Village. This is one I had held up from last week about Odyssey. Audio is undergoing a renaissance from transformation of retail to new platforms for audio. Smart marketers will leverage the advantages of sonic marketing. It's a different phrase to use. A couple of things I want to take from this story. So some of the comments that were made here is that audio adds reach and engagement. With all the teleconferencing in the past year, audio is an engagement experience, and in many cases is the new screen. Audio's ability to reach the consumer not only from an engagement standpoint, but to truly drive mid-funnel and lower funnel activity is what many brands have seen with the use of audio holistically in the last 14 months of the pandemic. Now, when they talk about radio and audio in general, they said that 90% of audiences are back across the board. 91% of the radio audience is back to go back to normal. Voice and smart speakers are contributing to the audio renaissance that's happening right now. Brands are rediscovering audio. For consumers, audio provides an escape. It's also an engaging medium. So they're trying to say that audio is still a place for marketing and for advertising to thrive. They're all kind of given that thought that they can do that. They can find a way to do that. But what they're trying to say here is that retail is making a comeback after the pandemic, and they're trying to say that audio still has a role in this case. Now, this story is from about a month ago that they talk about this, but they still feel like there's a chance that they can make things happen where they want to encourage people to go ahead and spend with them with Odyssey and their radio stations and their podcast platforms and all that. they want people to go ahead and invest in them. So they're just trying to make this case in this website that obviously talks about Odyssey in general, that wants to try to make that point. And that's what they're trying to say here. So I'm going to hold off all these stories about the music industry. I'm going to hold them off till next week and keep those around for when I need to. So there's two other stories I want to bring to before we can wrap things up. The future of TV news won't be on TV. It's a story from Variety.com I meant to go and bring up, and we want to bring that up now. I think it was another one I held back from last week. And one of the things they're talking about when it comes to news on TV is the problem that they have when it comes to streaming and what is changing for that. So the first trend of TV news is obvious. Cord cutting keeps increasing. And there's a acronym they use that stands for virtual multi-channel video programming distributors, or streaming TV services, OTTs. They're saying that they haven't staunched the flow to the degree hoped, thus shrinking the available audience for TV news. Yes, over-the-air penetration in the U.S. is growing, but expecting the digital generation to drop its on-demand habits to tune in for nightly news for broadcast is a pie-in-the-sky dream. And they're showing that the streamers, the digital natives, those between 15 and 29, have the greatest apathy of any generation for national and local news or even caring about access to it. So your younger audience is caring less about watching the news. They don't even care. They're not going to watch. So there's a slow burning reduction in TV news consumption. Older generations are more likely to value and watch news, but they are more likely to pull out of viewing as time goes on. The business has been built on a conveyor belt model where younger viewers can come in as older ones cycle out, but that's going away. Ages 15 to 29 are more than 3 times less likely than people 60 years old plus to say news is the most important part of TV, with ages 30 to 44 more than twice less likely to do so. So even the millennials are also saying news isn't as important anymore. The Gen Zs, they don't think it's important anymore either. So for those keeping score at home, that's the holy trinity of TV news offerings, local, national, cable, in which younger viewers are markedly less interested. The other illustration is also the lack of relevancy for TV news in the proportion of younger viewers accessing news from social media sources versus TV. Streaming news has higher usage among digital natives. It pales against the use of social media. And maybe that consumers don't know the news is available, or it could be that people don't want to keep adding additional content sources to their media mix. The role social media is now playing in news consumption is apparent, considering the fact that close to 1/4 of all these Gen Z and early millennials solely rely upon it for news. Given misinformation campaigns of recent years, this is a somewhat frightening statistic, the proverbial echo chamber on steroids, but also points to where people are going to their news and how TV news needs to amend its distribution. No, they're just going to fade out. Newspapers will fade out. TV news is going to more or less fade out. The cable news will find a way to keep themselves up, but they will not be news. It'll just be the commentary and the talking heads that we have now. That's what they all are. So they say in the story that in order to stay relevant, TV news must change with the times. The solution is to knock down the walls and distribute everywhere free and ad-supported. The new consumers expect content to follow them, not the other way around. Time to ingrain behaviorally on emerging consumers, not when the bottom drops out of the market in 10 to 15 years. If TV news fails to act now, it runs a real risk of fading to irrelevance among a large proportion of potential viewers. Well, if we all know what's going on with news, they're going to fail. Let's just say the digital disruption, there are certain mainstream, corporate, traditional media outlets that are going to fail. Newspapers are going to fail. It's just like what the music industry had, okay? Your physical units of vinyl. See, I went into an FYE store in the mall today, and you look at those stores, any record stores, there's a little bit of CDs all the way in the back, vinyl somewhat in the front and the middle, but then you have all this media-related product, whether it's, cartoons or anime or all this other stuff, but the original intent for the store, which was a wide-ranging music store, it's not even that anymore. They're just trying to survive. That's it. That's what they are. And just people don't understand that. And there's going to be some media outlets that are going to fall apart. And you know who's going to talk about that? Hopefully, I'll be around on this Broadcasters Podcast to talk all about it. So I hope you'll come back to go and learn more about what happens next week. We'll follow what's going on. And there are stories, like I said, hopefully it's not going to be so busy next week where I can actually talk about things. I'll have the story that I got from Fred Jacobs about our radio station's genres or lifestyles. I'll also talk about the power of TikTok and disrupting the music industry, the evolution of the music industry, and tune in whenever you want how TV marketing has changed in the on-demand era. So with all of that I have lined up for next week, I'll bring all that up, and we'll see what else comes up. But in the meantime, we'll leave it right there. Thank you for listening to the program, as you always do. Come back next week for another Broadcasters Podcast. Remember that content is king, and to control your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.